A warm welcome to Dr. Luke Munn from University of Queensland, who works with the Australian Internet Observatory and is also a very prolific and renowned researcher of internet and digital media cultures. And most recently, the author of, I think, your sixth book, Luke, if that's correct, which is called Technical Territories, Data, Subjects and Spaces in Infrastructural Asia. So thank you so much for having a chat with us today, Luke.
Oh, great. No, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Could we start, maybe, would you mind giving us a bit of a background to the work that you're doing at UQ there, including your own research, before we move on to discuss the observatory?
Yeah, sure. I mean, my work is generally in digital cultures, which is pretty broad, but kind of spans, media studies, cultural studies, sort of political communication science, that kind of thing, which I actually like. There's a lot of different breadth, I guess, to how we make sense of the technologies in the world and their social, cultural, environmental impacts.
Yes.
So I think that's a really interesting topic, and we can kind of attack it in different ways from different disciplines and try to, I guess, use different insights from different places, right, to kind of get a multifaceted portrait of how things like platforms and AI and algorithms and all that kind of shape our everyday lives.
Huge topic, and
Yeah.
and most recently you've been doing some work with the Australian Internet Observatory as well, which is a brand new institution which is trying to tackle some of those issues by providing better data and better understanding of them.
Yeah, exactly. So the AIO is a kind of a multi-year project set up by the ARDC. That's got the kind of infrastructure arm of the the organization. So it develops infrastructure for researchers, right? And historically that's been about telescopes and hardware and things for the hard sciences, right? But equally, I think it's really clear that humanities and social scientists also need their own kinds of tools and infrastructure. And so one of those things that I think brings a lot of people together is trying to understand how the internet, how platforms specifically kind of shape our identity, shape our everyday lives, shape things like privacy, right? And so the AIO is one way to try to get into that. And, for a long time, I think some of the platforms kind of had different transparency approaches where they would publish some of the material, that things like ads, right, that they were appearing on the platform. And gradually, a lot of those avenues have kind of dried up in some ways. It's become harder. Platforms have become more like, the classic black box problem, right, where they're very powerful, but very hard to understand what's going on under the hood, right? And so one of the ways it's come about in recent years to try to get under the hood is this idea of data donation. And so this is a kind of a newer technique where a lot of platforms now allow users to get information about what the data knows about them, what the platform knows about them, right? So to get zip files or other files that contain all the information that the platform has captured about them, right? So in the case of YouTube, it might be your watch history, right? TikTok, it might be things around some of the advertisers that target you, right? So these are really powerful sets of files, and so researchers, in the last few years have started using these to try and get a better picture, I guess, of what platforms are doing. So a big part of what the AIO is that, and then the other part is more traditional kinds of data harvesting and collection around things like Reddit comments, news comments on Australian news sites, right? So by gathering a lot of that and then doing analysis about, the kinds of trending topics, for example, right? We can get a sense of these are the kinds of things that Australians are talking about, or what seem to be important in these kinds of communities. So the AIO is trying to sort of pull all those different strands together into a kind of cohesive platform that will be made available to Australian researchers.
It's a very important development, I think, and the idea that a public institution, taxpayer-funded public institution, can hold and share some of this data, and that it not be entirely in private hands, in the platform's hands, is really, really important. So that's something we'll be discussing in our classes this week. And can I ask you, what can some of this data be used for? So it's about people donating their own platform histories, their own downloaded data in. When you get this data, what are some of the things that you look for, and what are researchers asking of this data?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different things you could do. I mean, some of the initial projects, so the ad observatory is one of those sort of initial projects where they're basically capturing ads from mobile device and looking specifically at sort of gambling ads, alcohol ads, these kinds of more controversial categories, and how these companies are, targeting people, or how they're trying to get a sense of who you are, and then using that to kind of target you in different ways. And that's been super insightful, I think, to actually get that material rather than just relying on people's perceptions of what these brands are doing.
Yes.
Um,
And this is
another,
literally and just to clarify, so this is the only way you could actually capture the ads that were shown to people on a platform like Facebook or Instagram through donation. Is that right?
yeah. So what they, a platform like Facebook, for instance, has what they call an ad library. So they make available some of their ads on the platform, and publish that as a kind of library that you can browse. But the problem is, of course, that that's incomplete, that ads are changing all the time, that we don't know, these are all available ads, but we don't know who's being shown what, right?
Yes.
And what's really powerful is that, in that particular project, you can see the ad sequence. This is something that Nick Cara talks a lot about, right? It's not necessarily just about the content of one specific ad. It's about the sequence of ads over
Mm,
time, and how that sequence is targeting a specific kind of person,
mm.
right? So having that kind of time, the temporal information, and be able to see how that sequence kind of plays out over weeks, over months, right, is really strong.
Yes. Well, yeah, it's very, it's really important that this data is being collected, because as you say, the context is super important. It's not just about
Mm.
the ads, it's about who they're shown to, when, how, why, what they're next to, all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, fascinating work. And so yeah, so you're relying on people, average people like us, downloading and sharing their data with the observatory. How does that work?
Yeah, so like I said, a lot of platforms now, they actually have to provide this functionality to their users as a result of the GDPR, which is this European privacy legislation, and other legislation that's since come around because of it. Basically says that users have a right to their own data. And so a lot of platforms will have now a setting or a little feature, and it's quite buried sometimes, but you go into your profile, you go into something like data about me, and there'll be a feature that says download all my data. Um, and often this isn't instant. You don't get a file straight away because it takes a while to sort of collate all that information. But basically you request it, and then a day or two later, you'll get an email saying your data is ready, and you go and you download that, and it'll often be a zip file or other kinds of files. And basically, once you have that file, you can then donate it to the Australian Internet Observatory by just sort of dragging and dropping into a form. It's a pretty straightforward process. And one of the important things we do in that step is to show people what they're actually about to donate with us.
Mm.
So we actually unpack the file a little bit and show, okay, this is your watch history, this is your purchase history, this is your basic profile information. So anything that you're not comfortable sharing with us, you can sort of just untick. And then once you're happy, then you just submit that.
Right. And is that donation capability, is that live now?
Yeah, so it's, very early days, but we are piloting it. I've been a sample user of a few different social media platforms to get some data, and one of the postdocs on the team is now running a pilot project. So she's got 5 RAs, and each of them are donating their data, which will be YouTube, Instagram, and one other platform.
Mm.
So yeah, we're testing it, we're sort of ironing out the kinks and some of the tools and things, but yeah, it's live now, and we'll sort of improve it over time.
Fantastic. And so we can see the public benefit here in the sense that this data is showing us what, platforms are doing in the wild in terms and what users are doing on platforms in the wild. And it's data which is not available any other way. But are there any like personal benefits to this? Like when, for example, when you are uploading your data, did you, does it help you, does it alert you to things that you hadn't thought about before? Or
Yeah, I think so. I mean, yeah, each platform differs quite a lot in the kinds of information they have on you. But it's interesting, like if you upload Netflix, for example, it's like a family-based account, right? So it's not even just your data, it's actually all of your family's data with their accounts on there, including my own kids, right? So you can get some pretty, intimate data in some ways. That was kind of surprising to me. And then, the level of specificity that some of this profiling takes is really surprising, right? So I uploaded Instagram, for example, they have a file called Other Information About You, which is used to target you. So this is all profile things like the fact that I'm a New Zealander but living overseas, right? That I travel often, or I'm planning to travel. I have friends with these certain kinds of characteristics, right? So it's pretty, and that's despite the fact that I've used Instagram a handful of times, right? So
wow.
yeah, so the level of detail some of these profiles have is pretty astonishing.
Mm.
At the same time, it's also interesting, like what's not in the profile, right? Where the blind spots are. And I
Mm.
think that's been really interesting to the team because, as we said, this paradigm is very powerful in many ways, but it also has its limitations about, there's certain things that advertisers are really interested in that doesn't necessarily capture who I am as a person, right? And so there's sort of the power of this data profiling, but also the kind of constraints about things that aren't really representative of who I think I am. It's interesting.
Yes, absolutely. And with that data, for example, about your psychographics and your consumption habits and all of those kinds of inferences that Instagram will make, is that based on what they've collected, or is it also third-party data brokerage kind of data being mixed in there?
Yeah, I think some of it's a mixture, right? So certainly, like Google, for example, when you go, their service to get your data is called Google Checkout. And so if I'm interested in YouTube, for example, I go to Google Checkout and it's got every single Google service. And so you can see straight away the power of being a kind of platform of platforms, right?
Mm.
Where you have like 30 or 40 products that have information about me, maps, Gmail, and other things, right?
Mm.
Um, and so you can imagine, we haven't tested this, but certainly you can see that sort of bleeding through of like different services and how they would inform information for other services and how powerful that would be. Yeah, and the data brokerage stuff is quite hard to track and hard to share, know exactly who's getting the kinds of data. But certainly, like in Instagram, for example, you can go through and see all the advertisers that have your data, and
Mm.
some of those will be based not on platform activity per se, but on that kind of mediation, maybe, right, of the data broker who then sells it on to another company who advertises to.
Oh, fascinating. Oh, well, I think you've inspired us about what's possible, Luke, and we can't can't wait to get stuck into our own data and see some of the surprises in there. So, thank you so much for taking the time to have this chat with us, Luke, and all the best with your work with the observatory.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I'd be really keen to see what you think of the tools. Again, it's, prototype alpha stage, but I'm keen to get feedback and see what's useful and what helps you to kind of explore your own data. Yeah.